A 9-year-old girl found on the road carrying a box. What was inside left the police in shock. The road stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, flanked by dry fields and sparse trees. It was a quiet, forgotten stretch on the outskirts of a small Midwestern town. Officer Daniel Miller wasn't expecting much as he patrolled the area. Maybe a stray animal or a broken-down vehicle. But then he saw her. A young girl, no older than 9, trudged along the gravel shoulder, barefoot and alone. She wore a faded floral dress, the fabric fraying at the edges, and her blonde hair was tangled with dust. In her small hands, she carried a box that seemed oddly heavy for her size. Miller slowed his cruiser, his heart sinking. Children weren't supposed to be out here. He pulled over, rolling down the window. "Hey there, sweetheart," he called out gently. "Are you okay? Where are you headed?" The girl froze mid-step but didn't look at him. She clutched the box tighter, her knuckles white against its worn edges. "I can't stop," she said softly, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I have to keep it safe. No one else can take it." Alarm bells went off in Miller's mind. He stepped out of the car, keeping his movements slow. "It's okay. You're safe now. Let me help you," he said, his voice calm and steady. The girl turned to face him, her blue eyes striking against her dirt-streaked face. They were filled with an intensity he didn't expect, an unyielding determination mixed with fear. "No," she said firmly, backing away a step. "I promised." Before Miller could respond, her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the gravel, the box slipping from her grasp. Hey. Miller rushed forward, kneeling beside her. She was unconscious, her small frame limp and alarmingly light as he lifted her into his arms. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The box lay where she had dropped it. For a moment, Miller stared at it, tempted to open it and uncover the secret that seemed to weigh so heavily on this child. But he hesitated. Whatever was inside, it would have to wait. Right now, the girl's life was more important. Miller placed Anna gently in the back seat of his cruiser and called for an ambulance. As he waited, he kept glancing at the box in his rearview mirror, its battered surface hinting at a story far larger than anything he expected to find that day. When the paramedics arrived, they whisked the girl away to the nearest hospital. Miller followed closely behind, the mysterious box tucked securely in his passenger seat. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The emergency room buzzed with its usual rhythm, nurses moving swiftly, doctors speaking in clipped tones. But Anna's arrival brought a ripple of curiosity. A lone child, barefoot and covered in dust, clutching an enigmatic box? It was a story that begged for answers. Officer Miller stayed close as the medical team examined her. He provided what little information he could, a name Anna, that she had murmured before fainting, her approximate age, and her resolute words about the box. The nurses exchanged glances but said nothing. "She's dehydrated and exhausted," the attending physician finally reported. "No signs of physical harm, but we'll need to run more tests once she wakes up." Miller nodded, his mind still fixated on the box resting in his cruiser. Despite the doctor's assurances, unease gnawed at him. There was something haunting about Anna, her fierce determination to protect the box, her reluctance to trust him. While Anna rested, Miller returned to the police station, where the box had been secured in the evidence room. It sat on the metal shelf, unassuming and ordinary in appearance. Yet its presence seemed to fill the small space with tension. "Looks like it's been through a lot," commented his colleague, Officer Reyes, examining its scuffed surface and worn edges. "What's in it?" "I don't know," Miller admitted. "She wouldn't let go of it. Whatever's in there, it matters to her. A lot." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "We should open it, see if it gives us any clue about where she came from." "Not yet," Miller replied, surprising himself with his hesitation. "It feels wrong. Let's wait until she wakes up." Back at the hospital, Anna stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting the concerned gaze of a nurse. For a moment, she looked disoriented, her small hands instinctively reaching for something that wasn't there. "The box," she whispered hoarsely. The nurse exchanged a glance with Officer Miller, who had returned to her bedside. "It's safe," he reassured her. "We have it at the station. Can you tell me what's inside, Anna?" Her expression shifted, fear and hesitation flickering across her face. "I can't," she said firmly, sitting up despite her obvious fatigue. "I promised." "Promised who?" Miller pressed gently. Anna's lips tightened. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "Oh, can't say." The nurse placed a comforting hand on Anna's shoulder, but it did little to ease the tension in the room. Miller sighed. This wasn't going to be easy. Hours passed, and Anna's guarded silence remained unbroken. Miller decided it was time to return to the station. The box, still unopened, weighed heavily on his mind. Whatever secret it held, it was becoming clear that the girl's trust would be a hard one. As night fell, Miller sat in his office, staring at the security footage of the evidence room where the box rested. Something about it felt alive, as though it was waiting for its moment. For now, all he could do was wait for Anna to trust him enough to share her secret or for the contents of the box to speak for themselves. Morning came quietly to the small police station, the hum of fluorescent lights blending with the muffled sounds of officers going about their routines. But Officer Miller's focus remained locked on the box. It sat on the evidence table before him, its worn surface seeming to challenge him. Anna's words echoed in his mind. "I promised." What could be so important that a 9-year-old would endure exhaustion and fear to protect it? Miller took a deep breath. "It's time," he muttered to himself, signaling for Reyes to join him. Reyes brought over a camera to document the process. "Let's see what's inside," she said, her tone a mix of curiosity and unease. Carefully, Miller removed the box's lid. What they saw inside left them frozen. The first item was a faded photograph, its edges curled and worn with time. It depicted a smiling family, 2 parents and 2 children, standing in front of a white picket fence. The resemblance between Anna and the younger girl in the photo was unmistakable. The second item was a hastily written letter, its ink smudged and paper creased. Reyes unfolded it carefully and began to read aloud. "If you're reading this, please know that I didn't have a choice. They're coming for us, and I can't let them take Anna. She's our only hope. Please keep her safe and tell her that I love her more than anything in the world. I'm sorry." The letter ended abruptly, the handwriting trailing off as if interrupted. The final item was a broken toy, a small wooden horse, its paint chipped and one of its legs missing. Despite its condition, it seemed cherished, its surface smooth from years of handling. "What is this?" Reyes asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Miller shook his head, his mind racing. The letter hinted at danger, but it raised more questions than answers. Who had written it? What had they been running from? And why was Anna there? Only hope. A knock on the door pulled them from their thoughts. It was a junior officer with an update. "Sir, we ran the photograph through the missing persons database," he said, holding out a tablet. "You need to see this." Miller took the device, his stomach tightening as he read the report. The family in the photo had been reported missing 5 years ago. The case had gone cold after months of searching, with no leads or sightings until now. Anna was in that family, Miller said, the weight of the revelation sinking in. But how did she end up here? And where are the others? Reyes gestured toward the broken toy. "This isn't random. It means something to her. We need to ask her." Back at the hospital, Anna's expression shifted when Miller showed her the photograph. Her small hands trembled as she touched the image. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "It was in the box," Miller said gently. "Anna, can you tell us what happened to your family?" Her lips quivered, but she remained silent, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't," she finally said. "If I tell, they'll find me." "Who?" Miller pressed, but Anna shook her head, her silence returning like a shield. The contents of the box had answered one question, but unleashed a torrent of others. What danger was Anna running from? And who or what was she so afraid of? As Miller left the hospital that evening, he knew the mystery was far from over. Anna's courage in protecting the box was remarkable, but it was clear that the secrets it held were only the beginning of a much darker story. The small-town police station buzzed with activity as Officer Miller pored over the details of the cold case tied to Anna's family. Files and photographs were spread across his desk, each one offering fragments of a story that refused to come together. The missing family had vanished without a trace 5 years ago. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual the night they disappeared, but one witness had mentioned seeing a black SUV idling near the family's house days before the incident. The lead had gone nowhere until now. Miller glanced at the photograph from the box, his eyes lingering on the younger version of Anna. She looked carefree, her smile wide and genuine. The contrast with the frightened, guarded girl he had met on the road was stark. What had she endured in the years since the photo was taken? Reyes entered the room, a laptop tucked under her arm. "You need to see this," she said, her expression grim. She pulled up a map on the screen, overlaid with markers. "I ran checks on reported sightings of black SUVs in this area over the past 5 years. Look at this." The map lit up with a pattern that was too deliberate to be random. Sightings clustered near small towns, always near secluded roads or abandoned buildings. "What's the connection?" Miller asked, leaning closer. "Not sure yet," Reyes admitted. "But get this, every cluster coincides with a missing persons report. All children, all under the age of 10. Miller's stomach turned. "You think Anna escaped from whoever's behind this?" "Maybe," Reyes said. "But if that's true, they might still be looking for her." As they spoke, Anna sat quietly in a hospital room miles away, her small hands clutching the broken wooden horse from the box. She had refused to let it out of her sight since it had been returned to her. A nurse entered with a tray of food. "You need to eat something, sweetheart," she said gently, placing the tray on the bedside table. Anna nodded but didn't move. Her eyes darted to the window, where the heavy drapes were drawn shut. "Can you lock the door?" she asked, her voice trembling. The nurse hesitated. "Why, dear? You're safe here." "No one's safe," Anna whispered. That evening, Miller and Reyes visited Anna, hoping to coax more information out of her. When they entered the room, she was sitting cross-legged on the bed, the wooden horse balanced on her lap. Anna, Miller began, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "We found some information about your family. I need your help to understand what happened to them." Anna shook her head, her grip tightening on the toy. "I can't talk about it," she said. "If I do, they'll find me." "Who, Anna?" Reyes asked softly. "Who are you afraid of?" The girl's gaze darted between them, her small frame trembling. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice barely audible. "The men in the black car. They came for us that night." Reyes and Miller exchanged a glance. "Do you remember anything else?" Miller pressed. "They wanted something," Anna said, her eyes welling with tears. "Something my dad wouldn't give them. So they took him, and my mom, and my brother." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. Miller felt a surge of anger and sorrow. Whoever these people were, they had torn apart an innocent family, and Anna had been running ever since. "We'll protect you," he said firmly. "I promise." But even as the words left his mouth, a sinking feeling settled in his chest. If the pattern Reyes had uncovered was accurate, it was only a matter of time before Anna's pursuers realized she was still alive and came for her. The silence of the hospital parking lot was broken only by the hum of a street lamp and the distant wail of sirens in another part of town. Officer Miller sat in his car, parked just outside the hospital entrance, sipping a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Reyes had stayed at the station to sift through more reports, and Miller's job was to ensure Anna's safety. Despite the calm night, he couldn't shake the unease creeping up his spine. Inside the hospital, Anna lay curled on her bed, her fragile body cocooned in blankets. The broken wooden horse was clutched tightly in her hands, as if it were the only thing tethering her to safety. The nurse who had locked her door earlier had tried to soothe her, but Anna refused to sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her ears straining for any sound out of place. And then it came. A low rumble, barely audible, but unmistakable to Anna. Her heart raced as she threw off the blankets and scrambled to the window. Peeking through the edge of the heavy curtain, she froze. There it was. A black SUV, parked across the street, its engine idling. The headlights were off, and the vehicle seemed to blend into the shadows, almost as if it had been designed to be invisible. Anna's breath hitched. Her small fingers gripped the windowsill as she tried to suppress the panic rising in her chest. They had found her. Without thinking, she bolted to the door, unlocking it and rushing into the hallway. Her bare feet slapped against the cold floor as she ran toward the nurse's station. Miller was halfway through another sip of coffee when his radio crackled to life. "Officer Miller, we have a situation." "Anna's out of her room. She's panicking." Cursing under his breath, he jumped out of the car and ran into the building. When he reached the hallway outside Anna's room, she was clutching the arm of the night nurse, her face pale and her breaths coming in shallow gasps. "They're here," she cried, pointing toward the window. Miller knelt in front of her, his hands gently gripping her shoulders. "Anna, who's here? What did you see?" The black car, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's outside. They found me. Miller's heart sank. He had no reason to doubt her. Rising quickly, he radioed the station. Reyes, I need units at the hospital now. Possible sighting of the suspects. Black SUV. On it, Reyes replied. Miller turned to Anna, who was still shaking. Stay here with a nurse, he said firmly. I'll handle this. But as he approached the hospital entrance, a cold realization hit him. If the SUV was here, it meant whoever was inside wasn't just watching, they were preparing to act. Outside, the parking lot was eerily still. The SUV was gone. Miller scanned the area, frustration boiling inside him. Had they fled, or were they circling back? He didn't have time to figure it out. His priority was Anna. Back inside, he found her clinging to the nurse, her wide eyes fixed on him. You said you'd protect me, she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and accusation. I will, Miller promised, though the weight of his words felt heavier than ever. But we need to move. It's not safe here anymore. By the time backup arrived, Miller had made up his mind. Anna needed to be taken somewhere secure, away from prying eyes and the reach of the men in the black SUV. But even as he ushered her into the police cruiser, a gnawing question lingered in his mind. If they had come this far, how much longer would Anna's courage and their protection be enough to keep her safe? The police cruiser sped down an empty road, the headlights slicing through the darkness. Anna sat in the back seat, her knees drawn to her chest, and her hands gripping the wooden horse like a lifeline. Officer Miller glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his jaw tight. Reyes, seated in the passenger seat, broke the silence. I've notified Chief Wallace. He's arranging a safe house. Remote location, minimal staff. If those men are serious about finding her, we can't take any chances. Miller nodded but didn't respond. His eyes flicked to the side mirrors, scanning for any sign of pursuit. The black SUV had vanished from the hospital parking lot, but its presence lingered like a shadow over them. Anna, Reyes said softly, turning to face the girl. Do you remember anything else about the night your family disappeared? Anything that might help us figure out what these people want? Anna hesitated, her small fingers tracing the grooves of the wooden horse. It was late, she began, her voice barely audible. I heard my dad yelling. He told my mom to take me and run, but she wouldn't leave him. Then the men came inside. Her voice faltered and tears welled in her eyes. They said something about a key. My dad said he didn't have it, but they didn't believe him. That's when they took them. I hid in the closet. They didn't see me. Miller tightened his grip on the steering wheel. A key, he asked, keeping his tone steady. Do you know what they were looking for? Anna shook her head. No. But before they came, my dad gave me this. She held up the wooden horse, its chipped paint glinting faintly in the dim light. He told me to keep it safe, no matter what. Reyes exchanged a glance with Miller. It's not just a toy, she murmured. It's important. Maybe even the key they were looking for. The cruiser pulled off the main road and onto a dirt path that led deep into the woods. The safe house came into view, an unassuming cabin with reinforced doors and a police vehicle already parked outside. Chief Wallace stood on the porch, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. Get her inside, he ordered as Miller and Reyes stepped out of the car. We'll post officers on rotation, but you need to find out what's going on and fast. These people won't stop. Inside the cabin, Anna seemed to relax slightly. The cozy interior was a stark contrast to the sterile hospital room, and the sight of a warm blanket and a crackling fireplace brought a faint smile to her face. But the moment of peace was short-lived. As Reyes examined the wooden horse, she noticed something strange, a faint seam running along its underside. Miller, she called, her voice urgent. This isn't just a toy. It opens. Anna's eyes widened. My dad said not to open it unless I was in danger. Reyes hesitated. Anna, we need to know what's inside. It might be the only way to stop these people. The girl's small hands trembled as she handed the toy over. Okay, she whispered. But be careful. Reyes carefully pried the hidden seam apart, revealing a hollow compartment inside. Nestled within was a small, intricately designed key. Miller stared at it, his mind racing. A key to what? Before anyone could answer, the distant sound of an engine echoed through the woods. The black SUV had found them. The low rumble of the approaching engine was like a drumbeat in the night, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. Inside the safe house, Miller sprang into action, signaling Reyes to secure Anna in the back room. Go. Lock the door and stay with her, he ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. Reyes grabbed Anna's hand and led her down the narrow hallway. The girl clung to the wooden horse, her eyes wide with fear. What's happening? She asked, her voice trembling. They found us, Reyes said quietly, kneeling to meet Anna's gaze. But you're safe in here. We won't let them take you. Back in the main room, Miller grabbed his radio. Chief Wallace, we've got company. SUV incoming. The chief, standing guard outside, responded instantly. Copy that. Backup is en route, but it'll take time. Hold the line. The SUV's headlights pierced through the dense trees as it came to a stop at the edge of the clearing. The engine cut off, plunging the woods into an eerie silence. Miller watched through the window, his hand hovering over his holstered gun. Two men stepped out, their silhouettes tall and imposing. Dressed in dark clothing, they moved with precision, as though every step was calculated. One of them carried a crowbar, while the other had a pistol holstered at his side. Stay back. Wallace barked, raising his weapon. This is private property. You're trespassing. The man with the pistol raised his hands in a mock gesture of surrender. We're not here to cause trouble, he said, his voice smooth but cold. We just want the girl. Hand her over, and no one gets hurt. Miller's blood boiled. That's not happening. The man smirked. Suit yourself. Before anyone could react, the second man swung the crowbar at Wallace, knocking his weapon from his hands. The chief staggered, but Miller was already moving. He threw open the door and fired a warning shot into the air. Get back. Miller shouted, his voice echoing through the clearing. The men froze momentarily, but the one with the pistol drew his weapon, aiming directly at Miller. Inside the safe house, Anna flinched at the sound of the gunfire. Reyes crouched beside her, her own weapon drawn and trained on the locked door. Stay behind me, she whispered. The standoff outside escalated. Miller ducked behind a tree as bullets ricocheted off the cabin's walls. Wallace, recovering quickly, tackled the man with a crowbar, wrestling him to the ground. Reyes, we got to move Anna, Miller shouted into his radio. They're too close. Reyes didn't hesitate. She grabbed the key from the wooden horse and stuffed it into her pocket before pulling Anna toward the back door. We're going to the car, she said firmly. But they'll catch us. Anna protested, tears streaming down her face. Not if we're fast, Reyes assured her. Outside, the fight raged on. Miller fired another shot, forcing the pistol-wielding man to retreat momentarily. Wallace, bloody but determined, subdued his opponent and turned his focus to the SUV. Reyes and Anna slipped out the back door, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. The cruiser was parked just a few yards away, but every step felt like a mile. As they reached the vehicle, the roar of the SUV's engine shattered the night. The remaining attacker had abandoned the fight and was now barreling toward them. Get in, Reyes yelled, shoving Anna into the back seat before jumping into the driver's seat. Miller, seeing the SUV speeding toward them, sprinted to the cruiser and threw himself into the passenger seat. Drive, he shouted. Reyes slammed the gas pedal, the cruiser lurching forward just as the SUV's front bumper grazed the rear. Anna screamed, clutching the wooden horse as the vehicle careened down the narrow dirt road. Where's backup? Reyes demanded, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. 5 minutes out, Miller replied, his eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The SUV was in pursuit, its headlights glaring like twin predators in the dark. Anna sobbed quietly in the back seat. I'm sorry, she whispered. Miller twisted in his seat, his tone soft despite the chaos. This isn't your fault, Anna. We'll protect you. But as the SUV gained on them, its engine roaring like a predator closing in on its prey, Miller couldn't help but wonder, would their protection be enough? The dirt road twisted and turned, the police cruiser's tires skidding slightly with every sharp curve. Reyes kept her hands steady on the wheel, her jaw clenched as the black SUV loomed closer in the rearview mirror. The rumble of its engine was relentless, a constant reminder of the danger that chased them. They're not letting up, Miller muttered, his eyes scanning the road ahead. How far are we from backup? 2 minutes, maybe less, Reyes replied, her voice strained. In the back seat, Anna huddled against the door, clutching the wooden horse to her chest. Tears streaked her dust-covered cheeks, but her expression was set in a mix of fear and determination. "Do they want the key?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking through the tense silence. Miller turned to look at her. "What key?" "The one in the horse," she said. "If they have it, will they leave us alone?" "No," Reyes interjected firmly. "Giving them what they want won't stop them, Anna. They'll only come back for more." Ahead, the road widened into a small clearing, and Reyes saw her opportunity. "Hold on," she shouted, yanking the wheel hard to the right. The cruiser veered off the road, sliding to a stop behind a thick cluster of trees. She killed the engine and doused the headlights. The three of them sat in silence, their breaths heavy as the SUV roared past, unaware of their sudden detour. "Smart move," Miller said, glancing at Reyes. "We don't have long," she replied. "They'll circle back." Miller reached for the radio. "Chief Wallace, we're off the main road, headed toward the old ranger station. We'll hold there until you arrive." "Copy that," came Wallace's reply. "ETA 1 minute. Hang tight." Reyes restarted the cruiser and navigated a narrow path that led to the ranger station, a small abandoned structure nestled deep in the woods. It was barely more than a shack, but it was defensible. They reached the station just as the sound of the SUV's engine returned, louder and more aggressive. The attackers had realized their mistake and were closing in fast. "Inside now," Miller barked, ushering Anna and Reyes into the building. The SUV skidded to a stop outside, and two men emerged, their shadows long and ominous under the headlights. They moved toward the shack with deliberate precision, weapons drawn. Miller and Reyes took cover behind overturned furniture, their guns aimed at the door. Anna crouched in a corner, her hands shaking as she held the wooden horse. A loud crash echoed through the shack as the attackers began forcing their way in. "We know you're in there," one of them shouted. "Give us the key, and no one gets hurt." Miller responded with a warning shot, the bullet splintering the doorframe. "You're not getting anything." The attackers fired back, their shots shattering the cabin's windows. Glass rained down, and Anna cried out, covering her head. Reyes leaned close to Miller. "Backup's got to be close. We just need to hold them off a little longer." Suddenly, Anna stood, her small figure silhouetted against the chaos. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the gunfire. Both sides froze. Anna held the wooden horse aloft. "You want this? Fine. But you'll never hurt anyone else again." Before anyone could react, she threw the horse against the wall with all her strength. It shattered on impact, the key flying loose and clattering to the floor. The attackers lunged for it, but Miller and Reyes opened fire, forcing them to retreat. At that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air, and red and blue lights illuminated the clearing. Backup had arrived. The attackers hesitated, realizing they were outnumbered. They bolted for the SUV, but their escape was short-lived as officers surrounded the vehicle, guns drawn. Inside the shack, Anna collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Miller knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said gently. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Is it? They didn't get the key, but what if someone else tries?" Reyes picked up the small, intricately designed key, turning it over in her hand. "We'll figure out what this opens," she said, "and we'll make sure no one can use it to hurt anyone ever again." As dawn broke over the forest, the danger had passed, but the questions remained. What was the key for? And what secrets had Anna's father hidden so carefully that others were willing to kill for them? For now, though, Anna was safe, and that was enough.